northeast of Maresfield. The A26 is closed following an accident. And in Cornwall, we're just hearing the A390, the Tregols Road at Truro, that's been closed at the scene of an ongoing incident. And there are delays of an hour on trains through Cornwall heading west of Par to Truro after a lorry hit a bridge at Par. Southeastern can't run Gravesend to Dartford and Ebbsfleet International due to a points failure at Gravesend in Kent. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
We're giving you not one, but two chances to win this month with two prize bundles that include an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash. But that's not all. You'll also get a brand new iPhone 16 and a £500 shopping voucher to spend at your favourite store. So why not be extra lucky this month? For a chance to win an iPhone, vouchers and £10,000 in cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good evening on Farage tonight. Well, they had many, many chances to stop the Southport killer, and yet once again, the Prevent programme failed. What do we do? Can we reform it, or is it time to scrap it? Local elections due on May the 1st this year, yet 5.5 million people are being denied their vote. And talk in some quarters of people not even paying their council tax now on the basis of no representation, no taxation without representation. Really interesting to see where that one goes. And why is it different to burn a copy of the Quran in the street to burning a copy of the Bible? All of that in a moment, but first, let's get the news with Katie Bowen.
Nigel, thank you and good evening. There's top stories at 7 o'clock. The government's counter-terrorism prevent programme prematurely closed cases into Southport killer Axel Rudakabana. That's according to the Prevent Learning Review published this afternoon. Outlining the findings in the House of Commons, Security Minister Dan Jarvis has told MPs that the government has begun an internal review of the prevent thresholds and has accepted all 14 recommendations for improvements in the Prevent Learning Review. The review found that there were 15 contact points between Rudakabana and public services, including Prevent and the police, over the years. Also today, the families of the 3 Nottingham attack victims have demanded a full statutory inquiry, saying names must be named after an independent review has revealed killer Baldo Calacane's fear of needles prevented him from taking antipsychotic medication before the killings. Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates were murdered in the summer of 2023 by Calacane. Health Secretary Wes Streeting says it's clear there were failings in how the care provided to Calacane was managed at every level. Grace's father, Dr Sanjoy Kumar, says for the loss of our beautiful, brave daughter Grace, there must be change. Barnaby Webber's mother has called for a meeting with the Prime Minister. Elsewhere today, the Prime Minister locked heads with Kemi Badenoch in Prime Minister's questions this lunchtime over the Chagos Islands deal. The Conservative Party leader challenged Sir Keir Starmer on the money being spent, accusing Labour of spending money that belongs to our children and their children, labelling it an immoral surrender. The Prime Minister hit back by arguing that legal certainty was needed over the status of the islands and the strategically important Diego Garcia military base. Metropolitan Police sources have told GB News that no action will be taken over allegations that Sir Keir Starmer broke COVID lockdown rules in 2020 by meeting with a voice coach. A Metropolitan Police spokesman said in a statement the specific legislation that would be used by police forces dealing with alleged offences during COVID has a 3-year deadline for initiating proceedings. As this alleged incident falls outside of this timeframe, no action will be taken. Just a brief breaking line coming out of the White House this evening. US President Donald Trump has not committed to putting US troops on the ground in Gaza as part of his proposal for a US takeover of the region. President Trump said during a meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday that he wants the US to take over Gaza and turn it into the Riviera of the Middle East. The White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, said a short time ago in a press conference that that does not mean boots on the ground in Gaza. And finally, His Majesty the King has visited the Polish Social and Cultural Association today, viewing a newly opened art exhibition and attending a reception with members of the Polish community in the UK. His visit comes exactly 1 year on since his cancer diagnosis was announced by Buckingham Palace. During the reception, His Majesty heard from staff, volunteers and community members about the centre's significance and its vital work in strengthening the Polish community. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now let's go back to Nigel.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
A statement this afternoon in the House of Commons by the Security Minister, Dan Jarvis. Let's just listen to what he has to say before we try to dissect it.
The review concluded that too much focus was placed on the absence of a distinct ideology to the detriment of considering the perpetrator's susceptibility, grievances and complex needs. There was an under-exploration of the significance of his repeat referrals and the cumulative risk, including his history of violence.
Well, of course, this is all about Axel Rudakabana, the triple murderer from Southport. And I think that the way the Security Minister put it in that clip is frankly a massive understatement. I mean, have a think about this. He'd already discussed the Manchester Arena bombing and stabbing people when Prevent decided to end its involvement with him. We also learn from the report that his name was misspelt, which meant perhaps the leads around him had not been followed up sufficiently. And maybe you could forgive it if it was just this one time, but it's not, because a very similar thing happened, of course, when it came to the murder of that very popular Conservative Member of Parliament, David Amess. Is this just part, once again, of broken Britain, where the institutions simply don't work and need radical reform? Is there something that can be done to save it? I don't know, but I just can't even begin to imagine how some of those parents must feel if they're watching the news tonight and seeing the total failings of an organisation set up to try and prevent these sort of appalling murders. Now, I'm joined down the line by Kevin Jewell, former Home Office Security and Counter-Terrorism Advisor. Kevin, are you there? He's not there. Right. I'm going to go to Tom Pursglove, former Conservative Member of Parliament, former Minister for Legal Migration, Immigration and significantly Crime and Policing. Now, Tom, no one doubts that everybody that works in Prevent intends to do a good job, intends to put a track on those that might prevent a threat. But it does, I mentioned David Amess, someone that you knew very well. The Prevent programme completely failed. This is just extraordinary, even down to his name being spelt incorrectly on the Prevent database. I mean, this is horrific.
Horrific, absolutely. And I, on this channel a few weeks ago, described this as state failure. And that's precisely what it is. I don't actually think that the language that's been used today in describing the situation really lives up to the reality that we're dealing with.
I made that point. Dan Jarvis was completely understated in the House of Commons.
And, you know, when you look at this case, it is clear to me that on a multi-agency front, there was a failure to grip this issue. I actually would argue that there were safeguarding considerations that ought to have come into this when it comes to Axel Rudakabana, bearing in mind that he was a child while much of this was going on.
Yep.
And that poses some really, really serious questions.
First referred age 13.
That is a terrifying reality, isn't it? And various parts of government, both local and national, should have been stepping in to intervene to make sure that there were proper safeguarding wraparounds put in place to deal with this. And I just don't think anything that's been announced today in terms of these new types of orders, which talk about things like community service, get anywhere near reaching the sort of extreme nature of the sorts of incidents and issues that we're dealing with here. This is radicalisation, and the PREVENT programme has clearly failed in this instance, and I hope that Lord Anderson of Ipswich will look at this in a really thoroughgoing way.
You've been a Home Office Minister, right? I mean, the phrase not fit for purpose, Home Office, has been around now for almost 20 years. Clearly, in terms of its purview and looking at PREVENT, the argument that it's not fit for purpose it's still valid.
On this, absolutely, definitively valid. And it's impossible not to conclude that, isn't it? Because look at what has happened. These young children have lost their lives in the most horrific way imaginable.
And many others, very seriously, with life-changing injuries.
And this must never happen again.
I am now joined down the line, I promise you, by Kevin Jewell, former Home Office Security and Counter-Terrorism Advisor. Kevin, we were just saying that, you know, for 20 years there have been descriptions of the Home Office and those under its purview as being not fit for purpose. But this is failure on the most astonishing level.
Yeah, good evening, Nigel. I should say at the outset, from the Home Office point of view, I worked in a different capacity, but from my policing perspective, worked with PREVENT and Channel and the like. As far as a failure, unfortunately, to put it mildly, it's one of those, the individual has fallen through the gaps, I think is a phrase that's been used before. There are a number of mechanisms and structures and organisations in place. And what seems to have happened here is that it is those that have not joined together, and the outcome has been that there's been a lack of ownership, I think, a lack of responsibility, and therefore this individual hasn't been picked up and the right kind of treatment or actions taken.
All well and good to say that it's not joined up, and I can understand how that might happen between different organisations, but in terms of PREVENT itself, you know, the misspelling of the name and that leading to problems, but the very fact that Rudakabana had already discussed the Manchester arena bombing and stabbing people when PREVENT decided to end its involvement with him. Is anybody ever held to account in these organisations?
I mean, firstly, I don't disagree about the severity of what was mentioned, and that goes back to my previous point around there are structures in place to deal with fairly set, rigid circumstances. So, for example, there's a multi-agency public protection authority which deals with violent people when they come out of prison. There's the multi-agency safeguarding hub to deal with people that are deemed to be a concern in their well-being and safeguarding. There's mental health who deal with people that could be causing harm to themselves or others. So go back to my comment, Nigel, about ownership. Is that it really is a case of, and as Matt Duke has written today, who's the head of CT policing, what was in place at the time was taken literally and I think rigidly. And again, I would say that no one goes to work to kind of make bad decisions or to do a bad job. But at the time, what was in place was around ideology and the like. And yeah, absolutely, it needs an overhaul so that these persons, and again, I would say he won't be the only one. There are people out there who express want to harm others or harm themselves.
I mean, look, of course, nobody works at Prevent intending to fail, and we understand that. But when you describe the multiplicity of agencies and departments that are involved in this, might it be a thought, Kevin, to get a blank sheet of paper and start again?
I wouldn't necessarily say start again. I mean, if we're going to focus on Prevent, and I understand, there's going to be a review taking place and it's going to pick up different people. But in today's society, and what's become quite evident with this individual, as I say, is that, what about the person who has got violent tendencies, who isn't necessarily expressing an ideology? And, I stand by the point earlier around ownership with regard to mental health. There is, under the Mental Health Act, people can be sectioned for the protection of others. So, it's around ownership and joined upness with regard to how an individual is dealt with. So, absolutely, there is room for change, certainly, around Prevent. But again, go back to my previous point, this person, he won't be the only one. There are people out there, and there will be more in the future, who have got a tendency, for whatever reason, to want to harm other people.
Yeah, none of that cheers me up at all, Kevin Jewell. Thank you for joining me. I'm joined in the studio by Lloyd Rossmore, former Labour MP. We've got this statement that was made earlier on, Lloyd, by Dan Jarvis. I mean, quite frankly, the language and demeanour he used was pretty understated, given how horrendous the report is. And it really is horrendous, and I think there's no point debating that particular issue. But we also learned today that Radicane, the triple murderer from Nottingham, somehow was given a pass, wasn't given, severe mental health issues, wasn't given the medication that he needed, or maybe he should have been sectioned. And of course it's easy for us to sit here in a studio in London and point the blame at failure. But I do wonder, it just seems to happen too often.
Well, I think there are two big problems. One is that I'm not sure we actually have a programme that picks up people who might not be perfectly adherent to a particular ideology, but are still extremely dangerous to society. Now, is that a failure of Prevent, or is that just a failure that we don't actually have a Prevent doesn't do that, Prevent does something else, and we don't have another programme that should be picking up those two people? I'm easy on whether you extend Prevent or you create a new programme, but clearly there has been a big gap, and we've now suffered a number of violent attacks.
And that's the point, isn't it?
Not just one, a number.
Exactly.
Because of that failure. And so I don't necessarily think it's always fair to almost blame the Prevent assessor. It's actually that we haven't created a programme, and now the eyes have been open, we need to do that. I think the second problem is there is a problem in this country that we don't deal with people who have really acute and dangerous mental health in the right kind of way. And whilst I think clearly 30 years ago, we locked too many people up for mental health reasons. Cuckoo's nest, one flew over the cuckoo's nest.
And now we're caring the community.
Now we've gone too far the other way, and there are some people, for their own safety as much as the community safety, actually they need a more interventionist, a more residential-based kind of care where they are required to be looked after 24 hours.
I have to say, Lloyd, I think that's right. We have about 120 people a year committing murder who have already given threats to kill. I had a situation like this myself. It's a horrible thing in one way, what Lloyd's saying, because we used to chuck people in institutions, Tom, and throw away the key. But maybe care in the community has just gone too far.
I couldn't really disagree with anything that Lloyd said there. And to me, there are serious questions around the systems and the interface between different systems at a local and national level. I think that is an area that needs a very close consideration. Whether there are sufficient join-ups within the processes. This does need to be looked at in a really thorough root and branch way, and concentrating on doing the basics.
So radical change?
I think you've got to think very radically about this, but you've got to fundamentally bring it back to doing the basics of this right, making sure that systems talk properly to each other, making sure that there's accountability around actions, and that where there are issues that arise, that they are properly tasked out, but also, are there the right flags at the right times when we see the sorts of behaviours that are clearly affecting society?
Clearly, even when there are flags, they sometimes get ignored or perhaps missed through a misspelling. Don't know, depressing subject. In a moment, let's talk about what happened in the House of Commons today. 5.5 million people who were due to vote on the 1st of May now will not be voting. Is that acceptable? And also, we're told the bill for giving away what we own already, namely the Chagos Islands, could be £18 billion. No, really.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Have you noticed that more and more stores are closing? Well, last year, apparently 13,000 stores closed for the last time on the high street.
Well, experts warn the worst is still to come for our small businesses.
Well, let's talk to retail expert Jeremy Baker. Good morning to you, Jeremy. How bad is it and what can be done?
Well, nothing can be done about it. Retail is like that. It's boom and bust operation. So last year, let's say you had a shop and it was booming. This year, the consumer can just change their mind. They don't need to come back to your shop ever again.
Well, it is sad, Jeremy, because our high streets are the beating heart of our communities, aren't they? And for many people, I know I can relate to my high street, it is such a depressing sight, walking down there and seeing them all boarded up and closed down.
But how often do you walk down there boarded up high street? I think people move on to something else. The online world is very big. Yeah. And lots of other things are very exciting. And so people, the shop, I like to go to my GP in a shopping centre and get my tests done there rather than tramp off all the way to the GP, for example. And children could go to little schools in the high street. I've seen that happen already. So lots of things could happen to the high street. It could be much more a social centre. Much more kind of like pubs, coffee shops, all that. Charities. I don't see anything wrong with charities taking over. But the idea of the shop-centred high street finished, that's gone. Never coming back. Goodbye. It's not sad, it's just life.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In May 2021, we had the English County Council elections. It was a Boris landslide. It was the high watermark of the Johnson government. They even managed to win the Hartlepool parliamentary by-election on the same day. But now those 4 years have gone by, and these people are due to have a vote again on the 1st of May. And yet, if you live in East Sussex or West Sussex or Essex or Thurrock or Hampshire or the Isle of Wight or Norfolk or Suffolk or Surrey, if you're one of the 5.5 million voters in those areas, by the way, nearly all Conservative controlled, your vote has been cancelled. You will not be voting on the 1st of May. You might get a vote in a year's time. You might get a vote in 2 years' time. Although the local government reorganisations under which this cancellation of the vote is hiding says it could take 3 years to decide what local reorganisation is. I used to think that only dictators would cancel elections. It's almost like collusion between the government and a cowardly Tory party. It's happening, of course, because they're terrified of what would happen to the results. I think the whole thing is utterly monstrous. I've had mutterings on this today from people saying, well, why should we pay council tax if we can't vote for our representatives? And don't forget, county councils are really rather important when it comes to elderly care, when it comes to kids with special needs, when it comes to dealing with potholes on the roads. They really matter. They do stuff that directly affects your life. So, no taxation without representation. That's what some are saying. It won't go further than that. But honestly, I mean, Lloyd, people should have their vote on May the 1st, shouldn't they? And by the way, if we're going to have these reorganisations of the structure of district councils, county councils versus unitaries, that's fine. But isn't it fair that we judge who should be running that debate on May the 1st?
Yeah, I would have preferred, and the chair of the South East Labour Party and all the Labour opposition leaders and all the Labour run councils in the South East all wrote to say, please don't delay these elections. So I think that this is people on the grassroots of this, on the front of it, are kind of saying, hang on a second, don't delay this. But I understand the point that if you're going to have an imminent change, you know what the situation you're moving into. So I think Lancashire...
But it's not imminent.
Wait a second. Lancashire, whose elections are cancelled, and we kind of already know what they're moving into because they're about a year ahead of this process. They'd already started a year before. I really understand that, and I can see immediately why you'd want to delay the elections because you already kind of know where you're going to. With these ones where we don't, I think that there is a real question about why we needed
a minor correction. Lancashire is not cancelled for whatever reason. Lancashire is now going ahead.
Oh, Lancashire is now going ahead?
It is now going ahead.
Sorry, I'm totally wrong about that then.
What I don't understand, I mean, it's this lot, it's Tom's lot, who are blooming terrified. So they'd rather keep the jobs and keep the money than get turfed out. Isn't that right?
Well, I actually think that if you were to ask Conservative councillors in these areas whether they would rather put the elections off or not have the reorganisation, actually they'd rather not have the reorganisation, and I have some sympathy with that. Because there'll be a lot of very good district and borough councils in particular, but also county councils that provide really good services.
I agree with you.
That do a good job for the
I agree.
I would rather not have any.
Well, then why not? Why not have this debate, rather here in GB News, why not have this debate between now and May the 1st as people run for local office, and let's start having a proper public consultation and debate and vote.
I mean, it was in the manifesto. To be fair, in the Labour manifesto, it said that we would devolve power if people agree combined authorities and mayoral. And during the election, a paper was published during the election, which you get the manifesto has the headline, and then the paper gives the election, which says that we will move to every council being a mayoral authority with unitaries underneath. So that structure was democratically voted for by the people of this country. Now, you can always say they didn't really vote on that bit, they voted on that bit. But that's with all manifesto pledges. It's a mixed bag, isn't it? But I do think
my point.
Different from cancelling the elections to moving towards unitary authority, which I think most people, even my county councillors, think it's mad.
Let's debate it in the election campaign. Let the electorate judge this.
Well, if the Tories are... Because some Tories have now come out in an outraged sense about this. You know, I've seen online Tory MPs. If Tories are really upset about this, there is an easy way to force elections in all these authorities, is that you force by-elections in all of the authorities. I mean, I've got a number of councillors, Labour councillors in my area, that are crying tonight because they thought they were going to retire with some dignity. They've made plans.
Well,
and actually, that's what they're upset about as well.
There will be a flood of by-elections as a result of this.
Let's face it,
quick point.
And having by-elections and
is worse.
It's terrible because that just shows that the policy is in chaos. That is a terrible.
No, it's terrible.
This is not what local authorities want. They don't want the reorganisation.
Look, well, local authorities... Local authorities are the ones that applied for this. Local authorities run by Conservatives are the ones that have applied.
It's the Tories running amok because you're Frit.
It's not forced. It's not forced on any authority.
That's what it is.
Kevin Hollingreck has been very firm as our shadow spokesman.
But then why did you allow your Conservative councillors to apply?
Why did 15 of your Conservative county councillors
No Labour council applied.
They're going to.
No, Lib Dems and Tories, but nearly all.
No Labour council
80% Tories. Moving on. Chagos. So the lucky people of Mauritius had a full parliamentary debate on this yesterday. Nothing from our government. I did manage to get an urgent question called with the Speaker today. Here's something of what I said. Powell, our National Security Advisor, has been doing the rounds in Washington, and he's been telling everybody, including the new cabinet members, that this is necessary, that we have to give away the sovereignty of the Chagos Islands, and that in those circumstances, a negotiated 99-year lease is the best option. But of course, that's just not true, is it? It just isn't true at all. It doesn't stand. There is no legal basis on which we have to give away the sovereignty of the Chagos Islands. An advisory judgment from the ICC has no force of legal power whatsoever. Indeed, America disregard it so much, they're not even members of it. That was my point, minor correction. The ICC's cricket. There must have been on my brain. It's actually the ICJ. But the point stands. I cannot work this out, Lloyd. I cannot. Why? Why do something that we don't need to do? Why do something that potentially threatens our security, America's security? Why pay possibly up to £18 billion? Although it was interesting, and I raised the question in PMQs as well. The PM did not deny it could cost as much as £18 billion. Why are we doing this?
Well, First of all, the US are a member of the ICJ, but they are not a member of the ICC, the International Criminal Court, but they are a member of the ICJ, but they haven't signed the optional protocol which makes the rulings binding. But they do still legally...
And they're not binding on us, because they're not binding between Commonwealth
on
members.
That particular...
So why does the government say we have to do this?
Well, there's two reasons. One is because civil servants and ministers who have never been to the region get embarrassed around their Islington chattering class dinner tables when people say, oh, but isn't it awful you're not following the... No one else in the country raises it, of course. Oh, isn't it awful you're not following the International Court judgment of blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And so they feel embarrassed about it, and so they say, well, we should do this because it's lawfare. It's the idea that, you know, the law should rule, not democracy.
But no legal basis.
Yeah. Well, from their perspective, there is a legal basis. You can have a legal ruling that says you need to do something, but it doesn't mean that you have to follow that ruling always. You know, so it has no enforcement. Yeah. And then I think the other reason is because there is a desire that this is a bit of a dirty, murky history. In fact, it is Labour governments of the past that expelled these people. Yep. It sits a bit uneasy with people. People don't really like it, and they would like that ending of history to be forgotten, and so that we can move on with clean hands. And there's an idea that our other overseas territories we're clean, but with that one we're still a bit dirty.
Yeah, well, of course.
The difference, the way to resolve that, however, like we did with other overseas territories, is come to an agreement that the people who are resident there, before we remove them, of course, and their ancestors, and you make it as broad as possible, should be able to have a choice. And I would respect, personally, the choice of any of them. And if you want to put financial inducements in, and if you want to then pay Mauritius for it, and those Chagosians voted for it, the harm that we cause those Chagosians, I actually think it's almost worth paying it, because we did cause them more harm.
I agree with you.
But they should decide.
100% with you. I find myself with Jeremy Corbyn on this one, interestingly. No. Let the people let the Chagosians go back and settle the outer islands. I believe that referendum would show they'd rather we had sovereignty than Mauritius. Shabby, isn't it?
I don't think...
And yet you lot started it.
I also don't...
You lot started it.
I've said on your programme before that I don't agree with the stance that was taken, actually, in our time in government on this, and I just
No Tory seems to agree. Every Tory we've got
I wasn't involved in any sort of angle in relation to that beginning of that
Not my fault, Gov.
But I can't justify, in my mind, spending £18 billion. Somebody's done a bit of quick footwork today on figures, which brings it out at £350 million a week, ironically, and we just seem to be pressing ahead on this at all costs, burning lots of political capital, winding the US administration up. This is crazy.
Zero votes.
I don't understand it. We're talking to the US administration. In a moment, we talk to Dr. Sebastian Corker, a Deputy Assistant to the President of the United States with particular responsibility for terrorism. He joins us in a moment to explain the Gaza plan. Is it going to become like the Riviera?
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hi there. If you're looking for some winter sun, you will find a little in the Greek islands, although it will be windy. Fine in Italy and across much of Iberia, although it is going to turn more unsettled through Iberia and, in fact, Central Europe as these weather systems move in during the next few days. But for Thursday, at least, plenty of sunshine for Italy. We've got that strong wind blowing through the Greek islands and a few showers associated with it. Otherwise, largely fine. And then the more unsettled weather arrives at the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Skies will clear across the UK overnight, leading to a widespread frost, but a sunny day for most of us on Thursday. High pressure is why we're seeing clear skies. Sunshine has been prevalent across England and Wales. We've seen showers further north, but as that high pressure builds in from the south, skies will clear up and down the country. Just some patchy cloud there for the Highlands and a bit more of a breeze for the north and west of Scotland, perhaps along the south and southeast coast of England. Otherwise, with light winds for the vast majority and those clear skies, we'll see a widespread frost. Temperatures in main urban areas, -1 to 1 or 2 Celsius, but in sheltered parts of the countryside as low as -5 Celsius first thing. So it will be a chilly start to Thursday, but look at this, plenty of sunshine across the map there. Just some patchy cloud running into Kent, and there'll also be some patches of fog and cloud here and there elsewhere. But for the vast majority, it's just going to be a chilly and frosty but bright start to Thursday. Bright blue day follows with plenty of sunshine remaining. Any fog patches that we'll see in the morning will burn away during the morning into the lunchtime period. Patches of cloud here and there, and increasingly so across East Anglia and the southeast, so less sunshine by the afternoon in these locations. A bit more of a breeze coming in as well. That breeze will make it feel cold, but on the whole, temperatures around average for the time of year, 7 to 9 Celsius. Similar on Friday morning, but I think in the south we'll see a bit more cloud through the night and hence less widespread frost, but we'll also see increasingly some showers arriving into the south and southeast of England. Meanwhile, the best of the sunshine will be across Scotland and Northern Ireland, and into the start of the weekend that cloud will become more widespread, particularly in the south, thick enough to give some sleety or snowy weather at times.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, Donald Trump never fails to surprise, and sitting yesterday in the White House with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, he had this to say about Gaza.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years.
Well, I'm very pleased to be joined down the line by Dr. Sebastian Gorka, Deputy Assistant to the President and the man with the senior role for counter-terrorism. Seb, welcome to the programme. Of course, there are people screaming crazy, saying, well, basically what Trump is trying to do is clear the Palestinians out of Gaza. What's the vision with this? What's he really trying to do?
Greetings. Great to see you, Nigel. Last we met was right after the inauguration. Look, these are the same people who said the president was crazy to say that he's going to tariff Mexico and Canada and the price of avocados is going to skyrocket. What were the results? 10,000 troops from Mexico to secure the border. Within 50 minutes of telling Colombia, we're going to tariff you, the president offered his plane to take back illegals to Colombia. So it's called the art of the deal. I tell everyone, whether you like President Trump or whether you don't like President Trump, if you haven't read The Art of the Deal, you do not understand how transformational and individual this is. We've been in this White House for less than 3 weeks. Nigel, it feels like we've been here for 6 months. The kinds of things we've done, from smiting ISIS in Somalia, to the incredible things that have happened with the economy, with Elon Musk, with illegals opening up Guantanamo, the worst of the worst. So, Nigel, I'm not going to give away what the arch real estate developer of the 20th century is going to do in Gaza, but he has one priority: stop the killing, and that's what he's doing.
Interesting. While I've got you, Seb, I must ask you, I've been talking to some of your colleagues about Chagos, about Diego Garcia, described by many Americans to me as the most important island in the world from their perspective. They've kind of bought this line that's been sold by Jonathan Powell out there that Britain has to do this, we legally have to do this, when actually we don't. Why have you all been so quiet on Chagos?
Well, look, I'm not going to qualify what the British government is doing, but I have consulted with the national security team here, and we are reviewing what the Brits are doing, what 10 Downing Street is proposing, and I've been authorized to say this. Diego Garcia is not insignificant to Washington and to this building, to the White House. America first does not mean America alone. And if you look at the 20th century and how, U.S. interests with our allies, our special friends in the UK, have been realized globally, what I'm going to say is the future of that landmass of Diego Garcia is not irrelevant to President Trump.
OK, enough said. Sebastian, thank you for sparing us the time. From the White House, I'm very pleased to be joined in the studio by Sir Malcolm Rifrin, former Foreign Secretary. It's interesting, a couple of points that Seb made there, that I guess Trump's got might and America's very big and very strong. He's been quite effective so far, hasn't he?
Well, he can be effective when he's dealing with someone who knows what he have to give back in return to resolve the crisis. I don't mind Trump surprising us, but when he does it in an utterly reckless fashion, with no real consideration, no deliberation with his own colleagues, I suspect, it simply comes out. And what he's done is antagonized the country he should be most trying to work with, which is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabians, not just the Egyptians and the Jordanians, have totally rejected what he's proposing.
And he's always been very friendly with them, hasn't he?
Well, the whole objective of the Trump presidency, as far as the Middle East is concerned, is for Trump to complete the Abrahamic Accords and get Saudi Arabia to recognize Israel. The Saudis have said all along, in principle, they're willing to do that, but only if the Israelis move in a gradual but clear way towards some sort of accommodation with the Palestinians over the question of a Palestinian state. Now, that's not been thrown away, but it's been made infinitely more difficult, with nothing in return. Nothing in return. He's antagonized the whole world. And you've got to see this in context. He makes these stupid demands for Canada to join the United States. He threatens to invade Greenland. And then this is simply the third of the same kind of reckless remarks.
Come on, Malcolm, he also gets countries to do what he wants.
He won't get Canada joining the United States, and he'd have to send the US Marines into Greenland to get that part of America as well.
He improves, he does it with Mexico or South America, he improves the deal, he can say to the American public, look...
Nigel, I know what you're saying, but no, it doesn't wash. With Mexico and with Colombia, there was a specific, identifiable objective. And the Colombians and the Mexicans knew what it was. They could negotiate with them without losing their sovereignty, without giving up their independence, and that's what happened. And all credit to Trump on these particular examples. What he's doing in the Middle East is pure recklessness to advance his own ego, because he loves making history as he sees it.
Well, he's very good at it. While I've got you here, I must ask you, very carefully worded message there from Sebastian Gorka over Chagos. They're not actually committing. Can you understand why we're doing this?
Yes, I can understand it, but let me qualify my understanding. This goes back, it's a long-running drama, and the important thing is when the deal was originally done, started with the Conservative government, the negotiations, and then taken on by the present government, Keir Starmer's government. When they did the deal with the previous government of Mauritius, I was on balance saying, let's get rid of this issue. We're going to have the islands for 100 years, and that meets our strategic requirements. People said, well, what about China? What they didn't appreciate was one of the main supporters of that original deal with the Indian government. And India has got more concern about China than we have, because India and China are traditional enemies that go to war with each other. And the Indians saw it as an advantage to have, for the first time, Mauritius recognizing the legal status of the United Kingdom and America having a base on the Chagos Islands. Now, we've moved on from there. If that was the deal still on offer, I would on balance say, yeah, it's in our interest. We're not making any major sacrifice to achieve it. But what has happened is there's a new Mauritius government. It has threatened to tear up the original deal, and it's demanding huge sums of money in order to reconsider. And I think now that there's a perfectly good argument. The deal loses more than it gains for that reason.
Interesting, well argued. Final thought on that, if I may.
Sure.
We did a deal with China over Hong Kong. We believed there'd be autonomy for Hong Kong for 50 years, and not even halfway through it's gone. How can we trust Mauritius?
Well, Mauritius is slightly less powerful than China. No, hold on. No, forgive me. It's a clever comparison, but it's a bogus one. There was no way China could be prevented from taking over Hong Kong if at any stage they decided to do so. Nobody was going to go to war with China over Hong Kong. Mauritius is a tiny island, about the size of your constituency, and therefore, if anybody tries to act in a military way, we can laugh them off the stage. You've got better arguments usually, not on this occasion.
Well, no, it's just a thought that international agreements get broken. Sir Malcolm, absolute pleasure to have you on.
My pleasure, thank you.
You remind us of days when the Conservative front bench had some really powerful intellect.
You remind us of years, not...
Yes, I agree. In a moment, let's find out why burning the Quran in public is more serious than burning the Bible.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
An absolute monster. It took Chloe and Sean Ing 90 minutes to reel in this gigantic 8-foot-long monster fish from Chigborough Fisheries in Essex. And upon weighing this enormous marine beast, it was found to have been 7 pounds heavier than the existing British record, a 143-pound catfish caught also in Essex. But as I understand it, you actually went for a Chinese meal when fate struck. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. So I was fishing an area of Chigborough where you have to fish at a fair distance. So I cast my rods out and then we ordered a Chinese. And yeah, so I got the bite at about 10 to 8 at night. And then about 20 minutes into it, my phone started ringing, the Chinese guys at the gate with my delivery. So I had to send a couple of guys off to go and get it. And then, yeah, the fight, obviously, you can't just stop the fight to go and get your Chinese. So, yeah, the fight went on, for about an hour and a half in total. There's no net in the world that's big enough for this fish. So we had to send out... First of all, I sent out a mate, Alex. He went out there to go and basically use what we call a sling. So that's a safe apparatus that we use to take the fish out of the water. He then went and he turned around and he was like, "We're going to need another sling." So then we sent out another friend with a sling, and these slings are 4 foot long each. So then we had the catfish wrapped up in 2 slings, and it was still slightly longer than that. And then we got to a point where we was like, now we've got to try and get it out of the water to photo, to weigh it, because obviously we knew then that it was possibly going to be a UK record.
GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
can abuse Christianity, you can set fire to the Bible, nothing will happen to you. You will come to no harm. And yet, if you set fire to the Quran, and you do it in Manchester, close to the memorial to those that died in the Manchester arena, you will find yourself in very deep trouble with the law. Well, unsurprisingly, the Free Speech Union are not great believers in blasphemy, and Dr. Ben Jones is Director of Case Management there. And I understand you've taken up this particular case.
That's right. We've spent the last few days trying to track this man down. We found him. We have arranged for him to have legal assistance. We've also arranged for steps to be taken to ensure his physical safety, which we appreciate, of course, cannot discuss now.
But the police published his address.
That's right. His address.
So they tell us nothing about, Axel Radovich-Hana. I mean, do you see why two-tier? People think two-tier.
His address, his name, his date of birth, all splashed over social media, all reported widely in the press. And the College of Policing guidance is absolutely clear that where there is an exceptional and legitimate reason not to name somebody
because of risk,
who is charged because of risk, they should not be named. And so the Southport case is clearly entirely different. The overwhelming public interest is that as much information there is released as soon as possible, and that didn't happen. The public interest in this case is that this man, firstly, should not have been arrested to begin with, because burning a Quran is not a crime. Certainly, he should not have been charged,
hang on,
much less named.
Is it or isn't it?
Well, this is what we're hoping to clear up, and this is what we are hoping to clear up with the legal help that we've provided for him. They have prosecuted him under the Public Order Act for a supposedly racially aggravated public order offence. And this has set an atrocious precedent. And when you look at what the judge has said in court the other day, that the feelings essentially of Muslims must be accorded particular respect, that Britain is a tolerant country, but we must not tolerate this. It's an atrocious precedent. And as soon as you head down this path, you are only going to encourage fanaticism.
Interesting. I mean, I have to say, folks at home, I don't actually approve in any way at all of burning the Quran or the Bible or anything else. Why give unnecessary insult? But can you see, Lloyd, the problem here and what Ben was just talking about, that different people from different religions are now genuinely being treated differently?
Yes, and very often the people that will want to, say, burn a Quran, it's not that they are white Christians, it's very often people who have been involved in that faith and had a falling out with it, So we get into a very dangerous situation where we are then intervening in internal disputes. Just like, Haredi Jews will often protest, burn the Israeli flag.
Oh, I know.
And, actually, it should not be us to suddenly determining which one's right or wrong on these things. I might have a view. I might have a moral stance that I wouldn't do anything like that because I don't think that's how best way to express yourself. Should the state come in? I'm a humanist. I'm a member of the British Humanist Society. We're very against blasphemy laws entirely. So we are very supportive of this going to court. But I do think we have moved probably a step too far to a situation where the police now feel that they need to morally prevent offence. And we saw it with the case of the woman who had the sign that said Rishi Sunak was a coconut, and she got prosecuted, lost her job as a teacher. Stupid sign. I would have. But is it prosecutable? No. I'm not sure it's about two-tier, but I do think it is about moral policing. And I think moral policing is dangerous.
I wonder, Tom, the term two-tier, actually it's gaining traction in the country. It's gaining traction in your old constituency and everywhere else. It's as if the police, the authorities, we think, well, there's one community that we cannot offend, and that's the Muslim community.
Well, the thing is, as has been pointed out by both of you, is that the behaviour that happened was completely unacceptable, and I would condemn it in the strongest terms. And I say that as well as somebody who's had the real privilege of spending time with some of the victims at the Manchester arena. I think it's totally offensive, actually, in the context of the memorial. But in terms of the substance of the issue, I worry about the fact that the creep that we're seeing with non-crime hate incidents with some of these public order issues is actually driving more societal tension, because there is this perception that certain issues are handled in a different way. And so I think that this is an area that government's going to have to look at. There is going to be tighter guidance around this to reverse it. And I just worry about the fact that there is this growing feeling that certain issues are dealt with in an uneven-handed way.
The banning of a Palestine march to go outside and protest outside the BBC because you're worried about a synagogue round the corner and not even on the route, equally is, I think, as concerning as the banning of this. I think that we need to reset, but it needs to be a reset on both sides.
Gentlemen, thank you. Ben, you've tracked this guy down. So what legally will happen next?
Well, I can't talk in great detail about the particular legal tactics that he may or may not use. We are clearly hoping that this precedent will be unpicked and that this will not stand and that he will not face any further legal
So he has
discussion.
a choice of how to plead?
Yes, potentially. He has pled guilty already and we're hoping that may be unpicked.
Very, very interesting. Now, I have to read out a statement from Greater Manchester Police. A spokesman said it's national and lawful practice to name suspects over 18 at the point of charge, and that is something all UK police forces do. When anyone charged attends court, that information becomes a matter of public record, and in this case, there were no applications made by the court, by his defence barrister or anyone else for reporting restrictions. Well, there we go. Now, I'm joined in the studio by Professor Matt Goodwin. Matt, what are you debating and discussing tonight?
Well, we've got a great show, Nigel, tonight. We've got former Home Secretary Suella Braverman talking about the Chagos betrayal. We've got the new definition of Islamophobia, which Labour are bringing forward. Is that a threat to free speech? If it is, how so? Then we're going to be going to Sweden. Here's something many people haven't realised. There have been more than 30 bombings in Sweden since Christmas. We're going live to Sweden tonight to figure out what is going on. And lastly, is reform a threat to the Labour Party? And if so, where is it a threat to the Labour Party?
The Sweden situation, quite extraordinary.
Unbelievable.
Where the Swedish press now barely report this stuff. And certainly they've agreed between themselves never to report the origins or nationality of those who committed these crimes. And I've seen this in Sweden for myself at first hand. And it rather links back to the debate we've just had. And you're going to talk about Islamophobia. But we are being divided up, aren't we?
I think we are, and I think millions of people out there sense the narrowing of the public square, that they don't want to violate these new social norms being imposed from above. But Sweden, just stick with us for the next few minutes. We're going to show you it is deeply alarming.
It's actually horrifying what's happened to that amazing country. I used to do business there in the 90s. You could walk about at 2 o'clock in the morning, feel very safe. You wouldn't now, at least I did. I got away with it. Let's have a look at the weather with Ada McGibbon.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Skies will clear across the UK overnight, leading to a widespread frost, but a sunny day for most of us on Thursday. High pressure is why we're seeing clear skies. Sunshine has been prevalent across England and Wales. We've seen showers further north, but as that high pressure builds in from the south, skies will clear up and down the country. Just some patchy cloud there for the Highlands and a bit more of a breeze for the north and west of Scotland, perhaps along the south and southeast coast of England. Otherwise, with light winds for the vast majority and those clear skies, we'll see a widespread frost. Temperatures in main urban areas, -1 to 1 or 2 Celsius, but in sheltered parts of the countryside as low as -5 Celsius first thing. So it will be a chilly start to Thursday, but look at this, plenty of sunshine across the map there. Just some patchy cloud running into Kent, and there'll also be some patches of fog and cloud here and there elsewhere. But for the vast majority, it's just going to be a chilly and frosty but bright start to Thursday. Bright blue day follows with plenty of sunshine remaining. Any fog patches that we'll see in the morning will burn away during the morning into the lunchtime period. Patches of cloud here and there, and increasingly so across East Anglia and the southeast, so less sunshine by the afternoon in these locations. A bit more of a breeze coming in as well. That breeze will